On yesterday's Locked On Nationals, we discussed why I think the Nationals will be making a splash trade this offseason. But let's get into some prospects who should be untouchable, and there are a few.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, make sure to check us out over on Twitter. And while you're at it, make sure to search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcasts. That is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and of course, over on YouTube for the video version of the show. Just search Locked On Nationals. Later on in today's show, we'll discuss some of the wild card race, as you've got the Orioles who were bounced, the Atlanta Braves were bounced, and of course, the New York Mets. They've got Game 3 winner take all today against the Milwaukee Brewers. We'll have that discussion in the third segment. In today's second segment, make this make sense. How is Darnell Coles coming back? And also Jim Hickey. What is the discussion there? We'll have that for you in the second segment of today's show. But we start off with who is untouchable. And again, I have got tiers of this. The tiers are untouchable prospects, hard to get, but not impossible prospects. And then my opinion on the trade block. We'll discuss that, but today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com. Yeah, the right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. So we get started with this. And as I said, there are three different tiers here. There are untouchable prospects, which we have two on this list, by the way. I will say one of them is a little bit of a surprising name. And then you have the second tier where they're hard to get, hard to trade prospects, but not impossible. You're taking calls on them regardless of who it is. And then there's the third tier of this is someone who I would trade at this point in time. So let's jump into this. I'm going to start off with the two players who are on the trading block, if I'm the Washington Nationals, trying to make a move. Number one, outfielder Dalen Lyle. Dalen Lyle is coming off two very promising seasons for the Washington Nationals. And you may look at his prospect ranking and say, well, is this guy really a premier prospect? I would not consider him a premier prospect at this point, but this is surely someone who has number one potential. And number two, there is a lot of buzz surrounding Dalen Lyle. The Nationals could easily choose to hang on to Dalen Lyle, and that would be okay. But in my opinion, I think he kind of makes the most sense as to someone who I would move off of and try to get some veteran help in this building today. It may be unfair, but still, what is the future of Dalen Lyle? And speaking of the future, there's another player here who at one point in time had a very bright future, but at this point, we'll see where that goes. That's Robert Hassell III. He is also my second player who, in my opinion, should be on the trading block. Robert Hassell III, if you remember, was one of, if not the premier guy in the Juan Soto trade. Ever since coming to DC, it just has not worked out for Hassell. He has dealt with a lot of injuries, which is, of course, a huge reason as to why he has struggled. But overall, you would like to see more production. And we just have not seen that up to this point in time. That is why I have Robert Hassell on the trade block, and maybe a team out there could figure him out, get his swing fixed, and see what happens moving forward. Now let's get to the second tier, the hard to get but not impossible guys. You start off with your best prospect, second best prospect right now, Brady House. Brady House is one of those guys where if the Nationals decide to hold on to him, great. Because I do believe Brady House has the potential to be an all-star third baseman someday. The 21-year-old can hit. He can hit for average eventually, and he can also hit for power. That is an elite combination right then and there. And also, by the way, is really good defensively over at third base. If Mike Rizzo comes out tomorrow and says, Brady House, your third baseman of the future, I say great. This guy has got the potential. He can do it all. But still, Brady House is not untouchable, in my opinion. Brady House could be kind of the marquee piece of a big-time trade. We talked about Garrett Crochet yesterday, the left-handed pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, but also Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Now, will the Nationals go after big-time guys like that? I don't know at this point in time. And if you were to go after guys like that, and you were to give up a Brady House and alongside other prospects as well, you better extend them. So I don't know what the Nationals will decide to do, but Brady House, in my opinion, is not untouchable. There's a price tag on him. Second, Jarlin Susana. Jarlin Susana was one of the guys where I was kind of like, is he untouchable or is he not? He's in the hard to get, but not impossible category alongside Brady House here. Susana is good, very good, has the potential to be elite as a starting pitcher. And really, his floor is going to be an elite closer, in my opinion. Jarlin Susana is a legit prospect. But also, there is a price tag for him, and I think you'll understand why a little bit later on in this segment. But Susana is not someone who I would be signing up today to move off of. I would prefer to keep him in this building, similar to Brady House. But Susana is, again, one of those intriguing guys where he's kind of a lottery ticket. Yes, he was dominant over the last second half of the season, really the last 3/4 of this past year across Fredericksburg and as well as Wilmington. But Susana is still only has one successful season in his professional ball over the last few seasons. Susana has a potential, and this year we saw that. But I would not be afraid to move off him. Next, Seaver King. Seaver King on this list, in my opinion, is probably the guy who I would be most likely to move off of. Seaver King, similar to a lot of these guys on this list outside of Brady House and a couple others later on, he's a lottery ticket. He is a project. But still, the ceiling is hard to ignore. And if you're an analytical organization out there who really can develop teams and develop prospects well at a high rate, like the Rays or the Dodgers or maybe the Yankees, then Seaver King is like a possibility for you there where you might say, I feel like we can tap into that talent. Let's see what happens. That's kind of what it is for me when it comes to Seaver King. A team out there will be able to develop him, and I'm not saying the Nationals won't be able to, but certainly, in my opinion, he's not untouchable. And in fact, I would say he's probably more than likely to be traded at some point in time if the Nationals were to decide to go that route and eventually make a big-time trade. One of the last few guys on this list as well, Yohandy Morales. Hard to get, but not impossible. I believe in Yohandy Morales. I would prefer to stick with him because this is someone who can come up in the bigs next season and be a big-time contributor for this organization. But he's not untouchable. And once you saw him get healthy in the second half of the season, you saw why the Nationals think so highly of him. Number one, the power is right then and there. You see it right in front of your eyes. And also the contact ability. Yohandy Morales, Yo-Yo Morales rather, he has got a ton of potential. You could make the case that this guy will be in the bigs maybe even before Brady House. And Morales, let's say he was healthy this entire season. He started off in Double-A. Morales probably would have had a decent chance at cracking the Major League roster maybe sometime this last September. But now we look into it, I would have to think 2025 will be the year for Morales to crack at one point in time, maybe next summer, maybe later on in the second half of the season to make his Major League debut. The Nationals think highly of him, and it's pretty evident. Also on this list, someone who's very young, 17 years old, Angel Feliz. Someone in the Nationals kind of broke out this last year. It was one of their big international signing guys from the last class, really broke out onto the scene, was an all-star. In my opinion, he was probably the most untouchable guy on this list. But again, it's not impossible. This is someone who is years away from making his major league debut. And again, he has got a very high ceiling, a ton of potential, still being a teenager. A team out there may be willing to kind of take someone lesser, quote unquote, like a Feliz and say, we can develop him, we can be patient with him, and we think this guy can be an absolute steal of a pick. Also on this list as well, Alex Clemmie. Alex Clemmie is one of those guys where he's a lottery ticket kind of guy. He was the marquee guy that you got in the Lane Thomas deal. A left-handed pitcher, has got filthy stuff, a high strikeout rate, a ton of volume, and he's 18 years old, and he did really well in professional baseball in his first season down in Fredericksburg. And he's young. He's got talent. You've seen it. You've seen the curveball. Everything works, and Alex Clemmie is one of those guys where he's hard to get, but not impossible. Next, let's get into the guys who are untouchable, because I pinpointed two guys, and I will say the second one on this list is a big surprise, but I would not trade him, and I'll tell you who that is. But before that, let me tell you guys about some of our very good friends over at Booking.com. And of course, Booking.com is the sponsor of today's show. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about, with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city during postseason. Maybe it's time to test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Luckily on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. Maybe you want to go up to Citizens Bank Park this weekend as the Phillies take on either the Mets or the Brewers. We decide that game today. If you want to see Citizens Bank Park, grab a cheesesteak. Well, Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you, and Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home team's or rivals' stadium. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. As we were saying, there are untouchable Nationals prospects, and there's two. Number one, in my opinion, is Travis Sakura. If you weren't aware, by the way, Travis Sakura just 2 days ago was named to Minor League Baseball's first team all-pitcher. Travis Sakura was one of the best starting pitchers in all of minor leagues this last season, in his first professional season. In my opinion, Travis Sakura is a top 30 prospect in all of baseball. In my opinion, I'll even go as far to say I think he's easily a top 10 pitching prospect in all of baseball at this point. Travis Sakura has all the talent in the world to be an ace someday. And I do think he can be that. And I think the Nationals recognize that. In order to trade Travis Sakura, you have to get a surefire thing back. But even then, I'm not willing to give up Sakura just yet. I am not. It depends what you would get back in return, but at this point in time, he is untouchable for me. He flashed that he could be your ace of the future, and at this point in time, I'm not willing to give that up. And I don't think the Nationals will be either. Mike Rizzo in trade talks has always been a little bit stingy, but in the best way possible. He will not give up his top prospect. You think back, and of course, in hindsight now, you look back at this and you're like, well, that wasn't all that great. Victor Robles. They refused to give up Victor Robles back in the day for years and years and years. It was always rumored the Marlins and the Nationals talking about JT Realmuto, and they wanted Victor Robles, and we would not give up Robles regardless of the price. I think Sakura is in that bucket right now. I don't think the Nationals will give up Sakura really for anything. Unless you get someone like a Garrett Crochet and you have an extension on the table ready for him to be the ace of your future. Maybe that, or maybe in a Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but If you give up Sakura, you're not going to be really giving up that much. That is how good this guy is. He is a big premier prospect, in my opinion, as he should be. But also there's a second name, in my opinion, who we haven't seen just yet, but has the potential to be a big-time prospect within this organization. That is shortstop Luke Dickerson. You may be thinking, how is he untouchable? Luke Dickerson has the profile of like a Mike Trout kind of guy. That is how good I think Luke Dickerson could be. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best players of all time. But so far, his profile and what this guy brings to the table, he could be a five-tool talent down the road. And as someone who is a high schooler just coming out of a high school ranks, you can't really trade that at this point in time until you lay your eyes on it. The Nationals gave him above slot in the third round, as they should have, by the way. And I think Luke Dickerson is going to be one of those guys where the Nationals will not give him up easily. And again, as they should. You should not just be handing guys off. And I think Luke Dickerson, again, should be considered untouchable at this point in time. I really like Luke Dickerson. I love that pick. And I love the profile. I love what he could be down the line. I'm not saying he will be that, but the ceiling of Luke Dickerson is very high for the Washington Nationals. So he is untouchable at this point alongside Travis Sakura. That went a little long, but still, I think it's worth a discussion today. But I do want to talk about this. We're not going to talk about Jim Hickey returning from the Nationals, but I do want to talk about Darnell Coles a little bit here. The Nationals hitting coach since Kevin Long left for the Philadelphia Phillies after 2021, Darnell Coles has kind of been on the hot seat as far as fans go. Is it fair at this point in time to blame Darnell Coles? I think it is fair. But here's also the thing that we have to realize. Darnell Coles can't just wave his magic wand and make someone a good big league hitter. I think there are positives of him, but I also think there are negatives as well. Number one, we saw what differences a coach can make just this last season with Sean Doolittle. Sean Doolittle wasn't the pitching coach. It was Jim Hickey, but still, we kind of know who ran the show. Sean Doolittle was really the guy behind the scenes that did a lot of heavy lifting. Darnell Coles does not have that. He does not have a Sean Doolittle in his corner to really kind of do the heavy lifting for him. And you saw that the offense has really kind of taken a step back. Individually, Luis Garcia Jr. had a very good season. That's good. That's improvement. CJ Abrams was an all-star in the first half. That's improvement. Keibert Ruiz has not taken a step up in what seems like 2 years at this point. Darnell Coles coming back, it is a problem, in my opinion. But also, at the same time, you have to realize this. What does he have to work with? Because if you're going out there with last year, for example, Cesar Hernandez, and the year before that, you have a young Sprout Lane Thomas going out there, you don't really know what to expect with him. There are success stories here for the Nationals as far as offensive guys go that, we kind of choose to forget sometimes. Lane Thomas, Jeimer Candelario last year, CJ Abrams the first half of this season, Luis Garcia Jr. from this season as well. But there are glaring holes. And we do realize that when we had Kevin Long here, who in my opinion is probably the best hitting coach in all of baseball, it does make a difference. And at this point in time, I don't think it's the fact that Darnell Coles does a bad job, but he also just doesn't make a difference. He doesn't. And at this point in time, is he kind of the scapegoat for the Nationals' offensive struggles and the lack of spending and the lack of developing guys? I think so. But I think it is time for a new, fresh start. Because the Brewers, when they moved off Darnell Coles, they've done pretty damn well offensively. And I'm not saying it's because Darnell Coles left. Maybe they just develop guys better, which they have, by the way. But Darnell Coles, is he the scapegoat? Possibly. That's a very good case to be had there. But ultimately, I think the Nationals should get some fresh kind of eyes in the building and maybe a younger, kind of more analytical driven hitting coach that can help these younger guys develop, because that is what the game is today. And I don't think the Nationals should really just ignore that part of this. Thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day. Next, let's talk about the wild card series, because you had some pretty wild games yesterday. The Tigers, they moved past the Astros. The Royals, they moved past the Orioles. And then, of course, the Mets and the Braves head to Game 3, and the Atlanta Braves were bounced. We'll discuss Game 3 of the Mets-Brewers series today, but before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. I can tell you this, every Thursday night game like tonight, I open up FanDuel, I get in my bag, and I try to place the best bet possible. Anytime touchdowns, live same-game parlays, whatever it is, you can do it as well. And all you have to do is you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, you get started with $200 in bonus bets that is guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All you'll have to do is download America's #1 sportsbook. And again, that is FanDuel. All you have to do, download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, or visit it at FanDuel.com. Now, let's tell you guys about some of our very good friends as well over at PrizePicks. And of course, we've talked about PrizePicks plenty of times on this show. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And of course, you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And it is live in the state of Virginia, Texas, California, and as well as Georgia. But of course, our home state, Virginia. And when you do that, sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And of course, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So let's first and foremost preview Game 3 of this Mets-Brewers series. It is a winner-take-all game, as you've got Jose Quintana going up the Mets tonight. And then, on the other hand, you've got Tobias Myers, kind of the breakout rookie for the Milwaukee Brewers this season. This is going to be a wild, wild game, as you can catch that game again tonight at 7:08 Eastern Time. The series is tied 1-1, winner-take-all in Milwaukee. But here's the thing that I hate to admit. I don't think the Mets will just go away. I don't. Is that like a frustrating thing to think? Absolutely. The Mets are like that scrappy team that, again, I've said it over the last few weeks here, kind of reminds me of the 2019 Nationals. They don't give up. They don't. And weirdly enough, they don't have the biggest name of guys. Like, no one was really expecting the Mets to make the playoffs, even back in May. Even in the preseason, they thought that they would be in the hunt, but no one expected them to get hot. And they got hot real quick. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to think of this Mets team. But I can tell you this much. Whoever wins this series plays against the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies are shaking in their boots if they have to go against the New York Mets. They will be. And even the Milwaukee Brewers. That is a tough series. And you've seen it all wild card series long, that teams with pitching, which the New York Mets, they've been pitching really well lately. It's going to be a pretty hard team to beat. So, and again, same with the Brewers as well. You saw Devin Williams come in last night, shut the door down. But I do want to talk about this real quick. The Braves, they got swept in San Diego last night, and the Padres continue to be a juggernaut of a team over the last few months here, ever since the Jerks and Profar game where he ran over to the Nats dugout and, in my opinion, went a little too far as far as cheering and whatever. But Jerks and Profar has not done anything this series, but they did win. They beat the Atlanta Braves, which I'm happy for. I'd rather see the Padres win. And again, I've got the Padres winning in 7 games against the Yankees in the World Series. So they look pretty damn good right now. Also, the Kansas City Royals, they look really good. You just saw them last week. The Royals are a really tough team to beat right now. They went into Baltimore, which, by the way, what an awful show out for the Orioles. Just number one, the performance on the field was bad. Only 1 run in 2 games after your offense was pretty damn good all season long. Adley Rutschman, by the way, his numbers since really midsummer has been pretty poor. The Orioles, they've got a lot of questions to answer this offseason. And in my opinion, if I'm Mike Elias, I am moving off of their manager, Brandon Hyde, because that was a pretty bad performance. And what a flat show out for a team that is at home with a lot of expectations. And you have a team like the Kansas City Royals who come in, they eat your lunch, and now they go on to the next one. So we'll see what happens tonight, Game 3 of the Brewers-Mets series. But you know who I'm pulling for? It's Milwaukee Brewers. So I will catch you guys on the flip side on tomorrow's show of Locked On Nationals. Until then, have a good one. Go Brewers.